Mhm.
Hi, and welcome to the Smart Divorce podcast. I am delighted to be joined today by Dr. Nikki Ramskill. This is going to be such an exciting conversation. So I have got to know Nikki randomly online, and we've just realised today that this is the first time we've actually met, having a conversation one-to-one, which feels really weird because I feel like I know her quite well. So Dr. Nikki has over 10 years experience as an NHS doctor and women's health specialist, and she recently retrained as a money coach after sorting out her own money mess. That's her words, not mine. And she's got a desire to help other women do the same. She believes that we can't truly have a healthy, shall I try and read that again? She believes that we cannot be truly healthy while a money nightmare is going on in the background. I'm sure that is absolutely true. And she now helps women from all over the world to improve their mental health and well-being through getting organised with their finances and building wealth for the future they truly deserve. Nikki, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate being able to chat to you finally. It's great.
I know. I've been really excited about having this conversation because I know that this is going to be really helpful to lots and lots of our listeners. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today is about controlling money relationships. So this is something that you've had whilst you weren't married at the time. It is an experience that you've been through. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's really funny because I'm now married to a different man, and at the time I was engaged to somebody else, and I was 21, 22 at the time, which is really young now I think about it, to be engaged. I'm thinking, wow, that's really young. Anyway, so it felt like I was in a marriage, though. It was that serious.
Sure.
We've been together like 7 years or something by the time we actually split up in the end. And so I feel like I've got that experience of having gone through a divorce. It's not quite the same, and we weren't married, so obviously we don't have the legal stuff to go through and all the money that comes with that. But definitely from the kind of guilt, the shame, the emotions, that was definitely similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you can chop this bit out, by the way. What do you want me to talk about with this bit? Just to talk about just generally the
You're
relationship and
happy?
the money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So in this relationship, I had allowed him to manage all of our finances. So he did everything. He offered to show me what was going on, but I really wasn't interested. It was more of a, you're doing it, you get on with it, and he would say things like, well, I can do this better anyway. You can manage the house, you can do those bits, and I'll sort the money out. So it was almost like that was our division of labor, even though I think I got the wrong end of the stick on that one. So what ended up happening was all of my money from being a student and then getting my first paycheck, everything went into our joint account. We had no separate accounts of our own. At least I didn't have my own account. He may have done, but because I don't know what actually happened with our money, I've got no idea how he was managing it. So I had to ask for an allowance, if you like, or money to be able to spend on what I wanted to spend it on. And I think it got to a point where I really wanted to go on a holiday with my friends. I'd never been on a holiday with the girls before. It was not an experience I'd ever had. And they all wanted to go to Paris, and I was really keen to go with them. So I said, I just need £300 to go to Paris. That'll be my board and lodgings and a bit of spending money and to get me there. And he said, no, we don't have the money in our budget to do that. You can't go. And that, I think, was at the point where I realized how deep I was into this relationship. And he might not see it as being controlling, and I've forgiven him. But certainly to a 21, 22-year-old that wants to live her life and do what she wants to do, to be told no, it's like being in a parent-child relationship. It's not like being in an equal partnership.
Mm.
So I used my credit card to do that. And I was already starting to rack up debt by this point. So this was just another thing to add on to the debt pile. A month later, he paid for one of those, you know, those Roombas, those Hoovers, those big round discs that
Yeah,
automatically
yeah,
go
yeah,
around your house and hoover it.
yeah.
£300 that thing cost. Guess whose money he used? Our joint money to do that. He didn't ask me permission. He just did it. He paid for it. So that was the unequal dynamic that was in the relationship. And I'd allowed that to happen because now reflecting back, I can see that had that mirrored for me. So when I was a child growing up, my mum was in control of our finances. My dad had to ask for an allowance to be able to do what he wanted to do. So I had that mirrored for me. So that, for me, that's what it was normal. You know, it was normal that one parent had the money, the other parent was the one that was told how they could spend it. And yeah, I took that through into my relationship, but it was the other way around. It was me losing the control and quite freely giving up that control. And I will never ever do that again, because when I finished that relationship, I lost everything. I had my name wasn't on our mortgage, because at the time we took the mortgage out, it was at the point with the financial crisis was just about to hit in 2008. I think it was around that time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I was still a student, so I couldn't go on the mortgage because I didn't really have an income. I just had a student loan that I was living off of. So everything was in his name, despite the fact that my student loan money and my wages were going into this property to help pay for it. And he refused to give me any money for it. He just said, no, it's now a negative equity, because by that point the crash had happened and we then owed more than the flat was worth. So he said, no, you've put me in a position where I can't afford to pay for our monthly repayments. Therefore, you owe me money. And because I felt incredibly guilty about having finished this relationship a year before we were meant to get married, so we'd already started planning our marriage at this point, I felt so guilty about it. I just paid him. And now when I think about it, it makes me cringe. And I think, oh my God, why did you do that? I even gave back my engagement ring. You know, all of these things I did out of the emotion of guilt and shame and just wanting to do right by him, because I thought I was the bad guy in all of this. And yeah, I made some stupid mistakes towards the end of that relationship, but it was more a symptom of the fact I felt so hemmed in and controlled, not because I'm a bad person. And I can see that now, whereas at the time I felt very much like I was in the wrong for everything. So yeah, so thankfully out of that one, and I'm never going to go there again.
How did you go about kind of uncoupling that?
It was very much like I had to like cut it off. It was almost like I'd severed that part of my life with a knife.
Yeah.
And it made him feel really unhappy with that, because he until that point had no idea how unhappy I was, because I didn't feel confident enough to be able to say to anybody how I was feeling, because I thought I was weird or odd for wanting to get out of this relationship. So it was very cold, it seemed like that to him, because there was no other way I could have done it. So it was very much I packed a bag, I had literally my books, my clothes, my shoes, and that was it. And I just left that entire life behind me. I had fur babies and everything. I had to leave them all behind me. So because we had no joint mortgage, we had a joint account, but that was very rapidly closed.
Yeah.
We had nothing else joint. Okay, I think we had a will, but that I changed my will so that he wasn't featured in it anymore, and that was it. So it was really easy. I had no children, we had nothing else was joint. So uncoupling from a financial perspective was actually pretty straightforward. It was the emotional mess that was left behind that took a while to get over.
Sure. Yeah. How long did it take you to understand that you had been being controlled financially, or you'd felt like you were being controlled financially?
I would say it probably took a course of a year from first noticing that he was saying no to a lot of my requests.
Yeah.
And it was only until I started asking my friends and my work colleagues about how they manage money with their partner that I realized I was in a really weird situation. And that is a real shame, because if we all talk about money more, actually more people perhaps wouldn't be in the same situation, because we then realize the kind of place we were in. And it took one of my friends to say, look, Nikki, but you sound like a desperate housewife. You're not even married yet, and you're climbing the walls. And from that, I suddenly realized that my life was going in a trajectory that I didn't want and I wasn't comfortable with. And I think that was when I made the decision I had to do something about it. And it felt like perhaps we could have gone to therapy and talked about it. If I'd spoken to a patient, I'd say, have you thought about therapy? But I think it was beyond it at that point. I just had to, in my mind, it had ended and I just had to leave, and that was it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do you think that if you had had more financial education at school, for example, that you would have not got yourself into that position? Or is there anything that you can think of that could have been done, because you were really young, like 21 is really young to be in that situation? Is there anything that you can think, if that had happened, then I perhaps wouldn't have been in that situation?
Yeah, possibly. I think if I'd done a bit more at school around money, perhaps it would have done. But the thing that I say to people is, yeah, it's all very well and good schools getting involved and helping with that. They're already very overburdened. They've already got loads of stuff they need to teach us. But if I'm being modeled by my parents about the normal way of managing money, I'm not sure I would have necessarily followed anything that I would have been told about. So it came down to me talking to people about how they did it to suddenly realize that mine was a bit of a strange situation to be in. It's not strange because there are lots of people in the same thing, women that look after kids and their partner is the one that goes out and earns the money. But they generally don't dictate to their partner how they can spend that money for their children, on themselves, on the house. The partner that is not working has full autonomy over that, and they've got very open and honest relationship about it. I had none of that. So that was what the odd thing about it was. It's not about one person earning more than the other. It's about how that interaction happened. So yeah, maybe if I'd learned a bit more at school about it, perhaps, but for me, the norm was that one person had all the finances and the other person had to ask for the money.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm just thinking about how, if somebody got into a relationship and was perhaps in the early days of a new relationship, and they're listening to this going, this is all sounding a little familiar. What do you think there is anything that you could, as a couple, have done to rectify it, like before it got to the point of needing therapy? Or do you think that was his nature?
Possibly a bit of his nature, and because I'm also very laid back and chilled out as an individual, that was the dynamic that kind of came out. But I think if I'd shown more of an interest in finances at that point, perhaps I wouldn't have felt so controlled, because I would have understood what was going on with the money, why I couldn't do X, Y, and Z or whatever. But if I'd had more of a say so in it, perhaps it would have been a bit different. But I think the relationship was probably doomed to fail anyway from quite an early state. I mean, we stayed together a long time. I don't quite know how that happened, but it was more, I guess, out of habit in the end rather than actually wanting to be with that person. But when you start to see them more as a friend rather than as a partner, and it's kind of gone anyway. And I also changed a lot in that time frame, from being 18 right the way up to when I actually eventually left the relationship. I became a completely different person. So it was never going to work out.
No, fair enough. I do think that we hear so often about couples who don't talk about the money. There is one person who looks after the finances, and that's perfectly fine whilst you're in a team, because you play to the strengths of that team, don't you? Like, I'm dreadful at gardening, so I never did the gardening in my marriage, and now I'm not married, I have a gardener, because that's how bad I am at it. But I think when it comes to money, even if you're not the person who looks after the money, you still need to know about it, you need to understand about it, and you need to know where it is, and you need to know what you're spending. And like, I think we talked about having a money date, just sounds dull, but just kind of sitting down as a couple and once a month or something and just going, okay, this is where we're at, this is where our money is, this is what we're spending it on, this is how it looks, this is where the car insurance is, this is where the mortgage, this is kind of our financial situation. So you're not both doing the same job, but you at least understand where everything is. Is that the kind of thing that you would advocate now you're in a kind of different position?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a great thing to be able to sit with your partner and say, right, okay, this is what's going on for our finances right now. But it can only happen if you can feel like that with your partner. And to be honest, if you can't, then you have to question the relationship. And the first time I revealed to my now husband that I was in a huge amount of debt, I panicked over it because I knew the reaction I would have got from the other one, and I'd extrapolated that theory onto my new relationship and hadn't kind of realized that I was in a completely different space, completely different man, completely different set of responses. And he was like, okay, that's a lot of money, but fine. And I'd said to him right from the start, I'm responsible for this. I'm not expecting you to bail me out of this at all. I am going to do my best to get out of it, but I cannot help you with the mortgage right now. In terms of getting a mortgage application, you're going to have to do that yourself. So luckily he was able to do that because he was in a much better position than me, and it was fine. We're now at a point where we're going to apply for a new mortgage, and it will be in a joint name, and it, because everything's all cleared up now and it's great. But I had to voice that, otherwise he would have found out when the mortgage advisor turned around and said, she's in this much debt, right? And coming from a mortgage advisor, I think that would have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, money dates, ours are really casual. When we sit on the sofa, we might have a glass of wine. It's not even a date. It's like, this has come out of our account this month. What's that? Oh yeah, that's for this thing. Oh, all right, cool. What have we got in our savings account? We got this. Okay, that's it. That's the extent of our conversation. But obviously when we have to sit down for a bigger conversation, the mortgage and stuff like that, we do, and it's fine because we can be open with each other about it. There's one thing that I actually have started getting people to do in my community. They're called money habitude cards. And I got my husband to do these the other day. He was really into it. I was surprised because he's not normally to anything that I do. So these are the money habitude cards.
I like that.
And they're about, I think about $20 to buy online or something like that. So I'm happy to share the link with you so you can go and have a look. But essentially what it does is it gets you to read statements on the back of the cards, and you have to decide, is it like you, or is it not like you, or is it sometimes like you? So you each do it separately. So you sit down and you put them into piles and you sort them out, and then you count up the number of different categories you're in.
Okay.
And your partner then does exactly the same, and you compare your results. So you might have a planner with a spontaneous person, or a security with a carefree, and then you can start to understand why you might clash over something, and that can be enough to sort of just open up the conversation a little bit, just to start to get a word in edgeways about what you want to do with your money. So that's quite a nice thing to do on a money date as well. Sit down and play a game.
I like that. I like the idea of cards as trying to understand. So one of the things that that we talked about that I wanted to discuss with you today was about money archetypes, because this is one of your things, isn't it?
Yeah.
So tell me more.
So I suppose it's similar to the money habitude cards in that you're categorizing yourself, but the sacred money archetypes is something that I've learned from a woman called Kendall Summerhawk, and I've become a coach in that area from her teaching. And it comes from the idea there are 8 different money personality types, and we've got all 8 within us, but 3 of them have got the biggest impact on how we are with money. It can change slightly over time, but essentially those 3 are your core, and then you might borrow some of the energy from some of the archetypes as and when you need to use it. And it's fascinating because once you understand what personality you have, you can then start to understand why you might be doing what you're doing. So I'm a maverick money archetype, and mavericks tend to jump from thing to thing to thing. They take risks, sometimes calculated, sometimes gambling, but they are quite entrepreneurial because they're happy to sort of take on that, and they'd be happy to invest and those sorts of things. Not every money personality is like that. And then you've got, if you contrasted that with, say, the accumulator, who's all about managing risk, having loads of savings, not being in debt, not taking risks at all, and you put that with a maverick, you can see how that would cause a clash. If you know, it's a bit like the security with the carefree or whatever. So yeah, understanding your money personality and which ones predominantly impact on you. And if you can get your partner to do it as well, it's quite a girly one. So if you can get your partner, you've got a male partner, they might find it a bit girly. But if you can get that, it's another way of opening up the conversation.
And I'm assuming you wouldn't kind of go carefree to kind of safety, security, those extremes, but can you kind of curb your archetype to sort of compensate for the fact that you're one way and your partner's the other way?
Yeah, you absolutely can. And the power of understanding your archetype is, if you understand how best you work. So if mavericks love challenges, so I set myself goals, challenges about saving, investing, you know, those sorts of things, and that's how I operate. For somebody else, it might be that they need to, you know, ring fence a bit of money for savings, or they need to ring fence a bit of money to have fun with, as well as do everything else. So it's just, you work to your strengths. So if you know that you've got an accumulator for a partner and you are the opposite and you're a spender, then you can both agree and say, right, okay, we are allowed to spend money. It is okay to spend money, but we're just going to put a little ring fence around it. That's going to be our fun pot, our money date pot, whatever you want to call it. And then your partner is happy because you're not spending beyond that budget. You know, ideally not spending beyond that budget. And your part, you know, and you can also help your partner out by saying, right, I agree to save X amount into our joint account, or whatever it is for us as a couple. So it's about understanding each other and flexing with that and saying, okay, I understand your need for spending money. I'm not going to stop you from spending money. So have this, you know, we agree as a couple we're allowed to do this, and we also agree that we save as well. So it's just flexing with it a little bit and playing around with the ideas.
That makes sense. So we're talking mainly to people who are probably at a point where they're single, starting on a journey on their own, perhaps who a lot of our listeners have never looked after money before. How do they go about finding out what their archetype is? And when they know, how do they go about not letting that impact in a negative way on their financial future?
Yeah, so on my website, there is a quiz you can do. So it's thefemalemoneydoctor.com/SMA dash quiz. And
we'll put that in the show notes.
Easier, isn't it? So when you do the quiz, it takes about 7 minutes, and the questions will be things that will type you into each of these archetypes, and then you'll get a breakdown, and you'll get your all 8 of them all written down with a score next to them. And then after that, I give people 3 videos. The first is their strengths, or their kind of gifts, if you like. The second is their challenges, and the third is their alignment. So when you find out what your strengths are and you find out what your challenges are, you might recognize yourself more in one over the other. So if you recognize yourself more in the challenges area, then you know that actually you just need to flip things a bit to work in your sort of lighter side of that personality. Each of them have got both light and dark sides. And then the alignment is around how you then manage your money to align with your money personality. It's like a romantic archetype is somebody who likes to spend money on the fine things. They like luxury. They like, I deserve that piece of cake at the end of the week because I've had a hard week, or I deserve that taxi because, you know, walking is going to make me sweaty and hot and I just want to get there quickly. So that's a romantic. Now, if you try to get a romantic to use a spreadsheet, they're not going to do it. accumulators will be all over that spreadsheet. They will love it, and they'll probably customize it and put all sorts of lovely funky colors on there, and they'll enjoy doing it. Romantics will look at that and go, I'll just have a copy of that, please. Or can I have a notebook and a pen, and do it that way? So they're more likely to kind of go off the back of somebody else in the way they do it, or make it really simple, because they don't like anything to be hard. So that's what I mean about alignment. It's like working with what you've got rather than fighting against it. There's no bad archetype. Everybody's equal. So if you come out as a romantic or a celebrity or an accumulator, none of that's bad. It's just
the idea of a celebrity. What's a celebrity archetype?
So the celebrity is somebody, again, a spender, but their spending is more about status. So it's not about luxury and ease and beautifulness. I mean, yes, they want the beautifulness too, but it's about VIP. What have I got that differentiates me from other people? It's the house, the car, the shoes, the handbag, it's that kind of lifestyle. Anything with VIP on the front of it, they're all over it. Yeah, I want the VIP lounge at the airport, please. Thank you very much. But in the same way that the romantic might have issues with the boundaries around it and overspending, they have the same problem. So debt becomes the kind of background of both of those archetypes, because you're funding a lifestyle that technically you can't afford. And again, celebrities are not likely to sit down with a spreadsheet and use it. They might do, because we can't tar anyone with the same brush. Like every archetype and your own expression of that will be slightly different. But you're more likely as a celebrity to have like a beautiful, luxurious notebook that you've got from some artisan fair in the middle of Greenwich or something, so that would be the sort of thing you'd want to do. Yeah, so it's just about working to your strengths and working to where you might find the hiccups and stopping yourself from going there.
I like the sound of that. That sounds good. So you've figured out what your sacred money archetype is. Then where does your coaching come in?
So it depends on the person. So some people want one-to-one coaching, and that's cool. We can use the knowledge of the archetypes to help to direct the coaching of where you take it. So you might need to work really hard on your mindset. Fine, that's what we would work on. Or like I've got an accumulator client at the moment, and she wants to work on investing, because accumulators really struggle with letting money go towards investing. So her goal for the coaching sessions is, eventually I want to come out of this with an investment account set up. Not that I'm going to tell her what to do, because I'm not an advisor, so I cannot say this account with this type of stocks fund or whatever. It's more about education. Like, these are the options. You go out and decide for yourself which one you want, and at the end of it, that's what you'll have. It really much depends on the person and what they need. So that's individual coaching. And then there's the kind of group stuff as well. So my archetypes coaching is in my membership, and that the membership is designed to help you navigate from not knowing what you're doing with your money at all through to, I'm going to start a side hustle to bring more money in, and everything in between, like protections and wills and all that stuff that goes along that. And the idea is, once somebody knows their archetype, they can also watch the videos for every single archetype if they wanted to, because all of them are in there, and then they use that to decide how they're going to navigate through and learn the rest.
That's amazing. And so we were talking before we started recording, and you're still working as a doctor, which has sort of blown my mind a little bit. What sort of pulled you into getting involved in being a money coach? How did you get into it?
Yeah, so the first thing I'm going to say is that's my ruler personality. So ruler is another one of the archetypes. So Maverick's my top risk taker, followed by the ruler, who is the empire builder. So they're very ambitious. So that's definitely where all that comes from. But when I first realized that I was in a money pit, I learned from other people. So I learned from other coaches and bloggers and gurus and all these different people that have got books, like Robert Kiyosaki's books, and Ann Wilson and Dave Ramsey. All of these are really big names in the industry. And it's only until I went back to work after a bit of a break that I then realized that my patients and my colleagues were having similar problems. It's just that we didn't really talk about it, or you didn't really notice it because you're so caught up in their medical issue. You don't know that there's a money problem behind it, or a potential future money problem because they're sick now and it will lead to problems later. So from there, I realized that I had something that I could talk about. So health and wealth perspective, started blogging about it, called it the Female Money Doctor blog. And then from there realized, actually, hang on a second, there are people out there called money coaches, and recently financial counselors. I just thought, wow, this sounds amazing. So I learned more about that, and here I am. So, because I can see the interplay between the two. It's so intertwined. It just feels natural to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about money is something we don't do we?
Mm-mm.
In the UK, it's like it's offensive to discuss money. We shouldn't talk about how much we earn. You're probably more happy talking about sex with your girlfriends than you are about money.
Or your own death, apparently. There was a research study that said we're more likely to talk about our own death than money. So, yeah.
Scary. We massively have to change this, I think, because I think there'll be more shame around money until we start talking about it properly and openly, and being happy to just be a bit more open about situations that we get ourselves. I just feel like maybe people will get themselves into less bad financial situations if they were just able to talk more openly about money.
Yeah.
But,
and it's also learning about it as well. It's the education stuff. So yes, it might come back to schools doing it, but I think the more of us that can learn for ourselves, the more we can pass on to the younger generations. You don't have to have kids to do that. You might be nieces, nephews, godchildren, but we can make that change happen, particularly as women, because we're the ones that tend to take on most of the childcare, and generally still in our society that's what it's all about. But hopefully that will change. But for now, we can be the ones that pass on the good habits. So if we can take responsibility for ourselves, particularly at times around divorce and suddenly when we're left on our own thinking, how are we going to do this? It's a great time to learn about it and gain confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you do take anything away from getting divorced or coming out of a relationship, if it's been the opportunity to learn about money and to have a better understanding and start taking control, that at least might be something positive coming from it. So
yeah.
Have you got any hints or tips or anything you want to leave our audience with today?
So I think when you come out of a relationship and you're suddenly having to do this yourself, it can feel really scary and really overwhelming. So I think acknowledge that it's normal. We are all going to feel like that, particularly if we haven't had that control. And the thing that I did was to get help. And for me, it started off by reading books, listening to podcasts, going on people's websites and reading their articles about how to get out of debt. Then it progressed to, I'm going to go and do that course, or I'm going to hire that person to help me do something. And again, that's not a bad thing either. And I think we've got this aversion to spending money on ourselves when it comes to these sorts of things, particularly in the UK when it comes to money and our health, because we've got the NHS to help us. We don't have to pay for that at the point where we need the care. And I think that extrapolates to other things as well. Like, why should we have to pay for somebody to help us with our debts or our budgets or investing? Actually, sometimes you do need to. You do need that help. You've paid for a gardener to help you with the thing that you don't feel confident with. So why do we not do that around our money? So I think we have to be prepared to put some skin in the game and actually learn for ourselves about what we need to do, and not just look at all the free stuff all the time, because there's a limit to how much free stuff is going to help you, because sometimes you do need to make it more bespoke and you need to go deeper on a subject. And the second thing is actually giving yourself time to do that, because we carry so much of the mental load, and we carry so much of the burden around what we need to do in the house and the finances for today, like the budget for the groceries or whatever. We're not thinking long term. So if you give yourself the time to do that, which is what I had the luxury of when I had that break in my career, that's when I realized the problems were there. That's when I realized I had to make a change. It was because I took time out to stop and think. So give yourself that time, learn from other people and take the time to do it as well. So I would say they're my tips around it.
I love it. Great advice. Nikki, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really lovely to talk to you.
So welcome. Thank you for having me.